Hello, brave, beautiful, beloved soul friends. Welcome to another Conversations with Kristin, that beautiful time of your day where you explore human consciousness and the healing journey of life from the inside out. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being you. It is such a privilege to be able to share things in this way. I can't imagine living decades and decades ago where I would have all of this knowledge in my brain and no way to share it with you guys. So yay, hurrah for being alive in this day, in this time, right here, right now, as the exact miraculous humans that we are. So thank you for being here, soul friends. Thank you for being you. Today, I am super stoked to explore something mega magical. Are you guys ready for some mega magics? Because I'm ready to share some mega magics. I would like to explore and explain and express the neurobiological insights, including the core causality of shifts and switches in consciousness when living with any form of trauma-based battle. And this could be PTSD, CPTSD, BPD, borderline personality disorder, DID, OSDD, or any other vast variety of these types of experiences. Okay, so in the past, there was some kind of weird, funky, not so pleasant stuff that happened, and then the brain and the body were just like not quite ever the same, and things have been weird and funky ever since, right? Okay, so you've got these different parts of you, and maybe these different parts of you don't have communication with one another, or maybe these different parts of you don't really feel like they're associated with each other, or maybe there's these different parts of you and they kind of have their own preferences. Like some days you're like, oh, everything's pretty and I like to be in nature and things are beautiful, and then other days you're like, oh my god, everything is dark and hopeless and the whole world is just in great agony. And you've got these different parts of you and they're having kind of their own separate experiences of themselves in life. And there could even be amnesic barriers where you're in this part of your consciousness and you don't remember all the stuff that happened when you were in this other part of your consciousness. Okay? So, you've got these different parts of your consciousness. You've got these different states of consciousness. And that's where the term alters comes from. It's alternate state of consciousness. Okay? You've got these different states, you've got these different parts, however you'd like to describe it. And maybe these different states and parts know about one another and they understand, you know, there's these parts of me that feel this way and there's these parts of me that kind of perceive this way. Or maybe you don't, and there's complete amnesic blocks and barriers, and you're like, I know there's these parts to me, but I can't get to them at all. Okay? So, when moving through life, there are these times where you experience a shift or a switch of consciousness. Okay, so we're going to explore the neurobiological causalities and what's actually happening inside of your unconscious brain and your body when this is occurring. Okay, so stick with me. This is going to be groovy. It's going to be super groovy, super great, super grand. Okay, so when you're moving through life, a shift or a switch happens. Okay, so we're going to explore the difference between a shift and a switch and what's causing the shift or the switch and what's neurobiologically happening during a shift or a switch. Okay, so first, what's happening is shift and a switch. Let's look at the difference between these real quick. Okay, so when you shift states of consciousness, it means that the neurobiological wiring that's generating your personal life experience is kind of hopping to a different track. Okay, so you can imagine like the unconscious mind as being like these complex railroad tracks. Okay, and it's producing your chugga chugga choo choo, your trains of thought, right? You got these complex railroad tracks in your unconscious mind. And when an unconscious mind is integrated, which just means that the neurobiological data within implicit memory systems is optimally connected and associated, okay? And I feel like there's some misconceptualizations regarding what integration actually is, so I just want to kind of clarify that. Integration just means that the cells inside of your body can connect with each other in a way that produces ease for all parts of you, okay? So that's what integration is. Integration has nothing to do with your consciousness. It has to do with the neurobiological data within your unconscious wiring that's affecting the way that your personal life experience is being generated. Okay, and we'll kind of explore some of those topics in other videos. So please feel free to stay tuned for more magical content here at youtube.com/Kristin Chronicles. Imaginary keyboard. So you've got these railroad tracks. You've got these railroad tracks in your unconscious mind. And so when there's integration, it means that all of the railroad tracks connect. And you're running and you're going and you're running and you're going and you're running and you're going, and you can get to all portions of the track without lifting yourself from the track. So you got this train and it's going through. A completely integrated mind means, or unconscious mind within the neurobiological data of unconscious neural networks, it means that all the portions of that railroad track connect. And you got this chugga chugga choo choo train, and it stays on the tracks the whole time because all of the portions of the track connect. Okay? And so when you're experiencing a shift, it means that you're going here and then you're going here, and then all of a sudden there's stimulation of a track over here that you can't connect with. And so the choo-choo train that is the self within experience is lifted and moved to a different track because the tracks don't naturally connect. Okay, so you've got, does that make sense? You guys tracking with this picture here? You tracking with my chugga chugga choo train analogy? So integrated data within unconscious neurobiological wiring allows for all portions of the track to connect. And so you got a piece of stimulus coming in and it activates a portion of track here, and your train just kind of goes there because all of the pieces of the track connect. But then you've got a piece of stimulus that comes in, and the piece of neurobiological wiring that's activated from that stimulus is over here, but you're over here on this track, and those two tracks don't connect. So how do you get there? The train is lifted from the tracks and moved to this other portion of the tracks. Okay? That's what's happening neurobiologically during a shift of consciousness. Okay? And then a switch of consciousness is like a more intensive, severe shift. Okay? They're two separate terms to describe different intensities of the same concept. They're two separate terms to describe different intensities of the same concept. Okay? Does that make sense? So I'm going to say it one more time because I know this is kind of like some new info for you guys. Shift and switch are two separate terms to describe different intensities of the same concept. Okay? So when a shift happens, it's a little bit more gradual. And you're not necessarily going to experience discomfort in your body. There's definitely going to be discomfort in your subconscious realms. There's going to be chaos, and you might feel even like a little dizzy and disoriented, and your feelings are going to change, and your perceptions are going to change, and you might rub your eyes as you try to orient yourself because your whole unconscious mind generating your personal life experience just jumped tracks. But there's not going to be this great excruciating agony in your in your body. You might be less likely to lose time. So a shift of consciousness, you're going on your tracks and something is stimulated and your train is lifted from the track and moved over here. When a switch of consciousness happens, okay? When a switch of consciousness happens, it means that you're over here on this train track, and over there, 15 miles away, is a train track. And not only are there no connections between them, but there's a great cavern, this great distance between them. It's not just jumping tracks where they're next to each other, which is a shift. Okay? So a shift, the tracks are close to each other. They're not connected, but they're close. So you lift off the tracks and you move over here, but it's somewhat in the same vicinity. Okay? Maybe not immediately next to each other, but they're close. Okay? But when a switch happens, it's like you're up here on a mountaintop on your train tracks, and then down there, like 15 miles away in like a valley where there's this huge expanse of land in between, your train is lifting from the tracks and being moved all the way over here. And because it's such a radically expansive adjustment within the neurobiological engagement of unconscious wiring that's generating your personal life experience as pieces of stimulus or experiential elements are being processed through your unconscious mind and the neurobiological wiring within it, that is what a switch of consciousness is. And this is why there can be loss of time, there can be blackouts, there can be traumatic responses where your body goes into a state believing that it's dead. It's called a dorsal vagal collapse, and it produces oxygen deprivation. There could be time loss, body pains. It's the other one. You could get a severe migraine. You could get very severe body aches. You could get portions of your body feeling very disconnected. There's all kinds of things that can happen with a switch of consciousness. Okay, and so again, switch and shift are two terms to describe the same concept but different intensities. Shifts are still intense. Like, don't get me wrong. Shifts are still intense. And anybody who hasn't experienced a shift of consciousness because they don't live with that type of neurobiological wiring would not even understand the severity. But then a switch of consciousness is even much more severe than a shift. Okay? All right. So now that we've explored the neurobiological wiring, let's explore this a little bit more. Okay, so friends, so that's the difference between a shift and a switch of consciousness. Okay, and this especially pertains when living with any type of trauma-related battle, such as chronic dissociation. This can occur in experiences with something like borderline personality disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex PTSD, or dissociative identity disorder, or otherwise specified dissociative disorder, or even like body dysmorphia disorder, and there's actually a lot more as well, and you might live without any kind of diagnosis, but you have some sort of trauma in your past, or you experience some kind of constant adjustments within the parts of yourself. Okay, so let's explore the neurobiology of this a little bit more and how it impacts your experiences of consciousness. Okay, so personal life experience comes from the neurobiological wiring of the unconscious mind, which means there's all of these implicit memory systems as nanoscopic cells vibrate and communicate with one another, and the way that those connections are happening within these cells of our body are what process pieces of stimulus or experiential elements of life into the sensations that we personally encounter as life experience. And what's happening here is that we have our neurobiological wiring, and then we have our consciousness. Our neurobiological wiring, and they're two different distinct components of the human experience. Our neurobiological wiring is the brain and the body system that houses the consciousness of our self-essence. They're two separate components, and this is really important to understand if you're going to understand shifts and switches of consciousness. Okay, so you've got neurobiological wiring. That's this stuff. It's, I have a hand, and there's wiring in it, and there's bones, and there's muscles, and there's nerves, and there's tissues, and there's communication going on, and I have this brain, and there's wiring in my neural networks. It's this stuff. It's this stuff, this physical stuff of this physical body. That's your neurobiological wiring. Separately, you have your consciousness. This is the self-essence within the experience. When you say, I am, I have, I want, I need, the I, that letter I, that is your self. So if you say, for example, I am hungry, the I in that experience is your consciousness. The feeling of hunger is sensation stimulated through your neurobiological wiring and data. Okay, so they're two separate components, and this is really important to understand when looking at shifts and switches of consciousness. Okay, so when a shift or switch of consciousness occurs, it's happening because of stimulus activating disconnected pieces of data within your unconscious mind. Okay, so let's first look at what activates shifts and switches of consciousness, and then let's look at how the neurobiological wiring of this occurrence affects your experience of self or your parts of consciousness. Okay, so first, what activates a shift or a switch? Why do they happen? You're moving through life and you're like, okay, I'm like this person and like I'm going to do this thing, and then boom, a shift happens and you're like, where am I? What was I trying to get to? What am I doing? I think I'm hungry. Wait, how come I don't recognize where I am. What's happening there? What caused a shift or a switch? What made your choo-choo train jump tracks? Okay? It's because of how stimulus is processed through the unconscious mind. Okay? So every piece of personal life experience comes from the processing of abstract stimulus through the neurobiological wiring of the unconscious mind into sensations of personal life experience. Okay? Personal life experience comes from inside of us, inside of our neurobiological wiring beyond all direct perception and immediate awareness. And so when a shift or a switch of consciousness happens, it's because a piece of stimulus, which could be internal or external. Internal stimulus are like thoughts and feelings that are going on. Like if you have a thought of, I'm hungry, that's a piece of internal stimulus that goes in and activates more information. And then your neurobiological data projects information. You're like, maybe I'll go look in the refrigerator. And it's because you had this sensation of hunger that you noticed as I'm hungry, which then allowed you to have guidance in responding to that. All of that was internal stimulus activating more pieces of neurobiological data within your unconscious mind. You had an unconscious feeling of hunger, you noticed the hunger and described it, and then that generated more activations, and then you're like, I think I'm going to go open the refrigerator and see what's inside of it. All of that was internal stimulus activating your implicit memory systems. Memory systems are there to guide you through life. That's their purpose. That's their neurobiological purpose. The purpose of memory systems is to help you navigate your life. Okay? So stimulus is constantly engaging different portions of our memory systems. So what happens to cause a shift or a switch of consciousness is a piece of stimulus, either internal or external. So something that was thought or felt within or beyond awareness, or something that was absorbed from the outside world, like a piece of light waves or a piece of sound waves, something you hear, something you see. Stimulus came in and activated portions of the neurobiological wiring of your unconscious mind, aka your implicit memory systems. And it activated data that didn't have connection with each other. So you're in this portion of your memory systems, you're in this part of your railroad tracks, right? And you're doing this stuff, and you're this train on these tracks. But then all of a sudden, there's a sound that comes in, and it's automatically unconsciously absorbed, and then that sound is processed through your unconscious mind, and the associations connected with that sound don't exist in this realm of your train tracks. So you're here in your train tracks, but the connections associated with the vibrational frequency of the auditory stimulus of the sound that was just absorbed are over here on this completely separate portion of your train tracks, and there's no connection, and there's this big gap between them. And so you automatically, your choo-choo train automatically gets lifted from those tracks and moved over here because this is more relevant, according to the unconscious mind, because the memory systems are all about navigating life. So if you're over here doing this, but then life is like, oh, but here, have this stimulus, then your memory systems are going to say, okay, let's look at information related with this stimulus. Okay, so stimulus activates pieces of neurobiological data within unconscious memory systems that don't have connection with each other. Because memory systems are all about associations. It's about coupling. And if memory systems don't have connections, there's this separation between the associations. They never got to hang out. It's like long lost relatives. You're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I had a second cousin. Where did you come from? I didn't even know you existed. Your family? What? It's like that. It's like having relatives and they never got to meet. They just never got a chance to meet each other. They don't even know that the other one exists. Okay? And so some form of stimulus comes in and activates pieces of neurobiological data that just never got a chance to meet. They just never got a chance to hang out with one another. They never got a chance to associate with each other. Okay? So that's the neurobiological core causality of switches and shifts of consciousness. It's when a piece of stimulus comes in and activates data that doesn't have connection with the part of your brain that you're currently accessing. And this ranges along a spectrum. Everything's on a spectrum. There is no like one obvious point blank, this is what's happening. Everyone's experiences are so different. So everything happens on a spectrum, and it could be a minor shift, or it could be an intense shift, or it could be a minor switch, or it could be an intense switch of consciousness. And so you might just feel a subtle shift of your sensations and awareness, or you might suddenly have no idea who you are or what you're doing. And it's because of this. It's because of how stimulus is activating neurobiological data within your unconscious memory systems, which is what produces your personal life experience. And there's this big old gap between these parts of your train track. And all of this is stored in neurobiological data of your unconscious mind. All of this is happening beyond awareness, but you do have power to rewire this gradually. So how does this relate with experiences of consciousness? What's happening there? Okay, so you've got this neurobiological data and wiring, and then you've got your parts of consciousness. When personal life experience is generated, it's because stimulus is coming in, being shifted through your neurobiological wiring, and then certain projections are happening that tell you this is what's happening. This is the sight of a bird. This is the sight of grass. And your personal life experience is being projected into your experience, or into experiences of parts of your consciousness. So you've got parts of your consciousness that are your self-essence, and they experience themselves in life based on neurobiological projections of subconscious data or unconscious data within your implicit memory systems, which are activated through the absorption of stimulus, which could be internal or external. And so when there's separation between parts, it's not because parts are separated, it's because the neurobiological data creating their personal experiences lacks connection. And so the projections creating experience feel like different things because that data doesn't have connection with each other. So when you experience life through a distinct separation of parts of consciousness, it's not because parts are separate, it's because the neurobiological data generating the automated sensations of personal life experience regarding identity and the world they don't have connection with each other. And this is important to keep in mind because there can feel like a lot of division between parts of consciousness, but when you can understand that it's not your parts who are divided. It's not your parts who are divided. You are always a whole person. It's actually just the neurobiological wiring that's generated the particulars of your personal life experience, and that stems from implicit memory systems. And it's just brain cells and cells throughout your ganglia in your body that just haven't had a chance to meet. So this is all about shifts and switches of consciousness, and it's an invitation to practice greater compassion towards all parts of your being. With this renewed sense of self-understanding, expansive hope for healing may ignite. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I can see about addressing them in follow-up videos. And please feel free to stay tuned for a variety of other videos that are exploring some of these topics a little more with specificities. Like we'll be looking at what is integration actually, because it has nothing to do with your parts of consciousness. Your parts of consciousness are not what integrate. That's a misleading misconceptualization dancing across the globe. Integration has nothing to do with the parts of your consciousness. And we'll look at memory systems and what it actually looks like to have healthy coupling and what happens when there's not. We'll look at all kinds of particulars about this. So please stay tuned here at youtube.com/Kristin Chronicles as I continue sharing some super mega magics that I've been learning these past few years. And if you enjoyed hanging out, if you liked hearing these interesting concepts, if you learned something new, or if you just want to spread a little love into the world, I invite you to hit that like and subscribe button. Or maybe it's on this side. It's on one of the sides of this video here. I really appreciate your support on my channel as I continue sharing my healing journey messages. And if you would ever like to get together through a consciousness consulting call and share sacred healing space and connect one-on-one so that you can have more insight and guidance, clarity, and empowerment along your everyday healing journey through life, I would be absolutely honored to serve as your healing journey guide. It would be a blessed honor and a sacred privilege. So friends, you could explore more about who I am, what I do, or go ahead and schedule a one-on-one session with me at KristinWindsor.com. I look forward to connecting with you, beloveds. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being you. And please feel free to share this if you're in online support groups or if you have friends who live with these kinds of experiences of consciousness. Please feel free to share this. It would be an honor to allow what I've learned to be out there in a bigger way. This stuff is not really known about or understood or freely openly talked about, especially with a neurobiological backdrop in these experiences. So please feel free to share this. It would be an honor to just kind of get this insight and awareness out there. I really appreciate your support in my healing journey messages as I share them. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Thank you so much for just taking time out of your day to connect and hear what I have to say. It means a lot to have this opportunity to share. So thank you. I am sending you so much love and light along your everyday healing journey through life, my sacred beloved soul friends. Namaste. The love and light in my wonder-filled consciousness. See and honor the love and light in your wonder-filled consciousness. Thank you for connecting, soul friends, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Blessings. Have a beautiful and wonder-filled day.